today?
Good. Well, hopefully you all made it here without having to use your umbrella, and hopefully we have the same luck after this is done. I know some of you are in this building, and I think that's a perk, but I'm really glad that you guys made it over here for today's session. This has been a long time coming. We have been in communications with Megan for, maybe like 6 months now? Trying to get something going, and I have to give a huge shout out to our graduate assistant, Christina Bookout, who actually came up with the idea of doing a nutrition series. And I think it's something that our program definitely needed. But with all the different things that you can add to a wellness program, I'm glad that Christina thought of bringing a workshop and a continuing series that will educate us on how we can be a little bit more aware of our nutrition. So today is Nutrition 101, and Megan Windham is going to present on that. And there will be time for questions, and if you have any questions, definitely ask her. You can stay after as well if you have any questions. And those of you who are watching via TTVN, while there's not a chat option, feel free to email me any of your questions at wellness@tamu.edu. I'm happy to forward those over to Megan, or if she provides her contact information, feel free to reach out to her as well. So other than that, I'm just going to turn it over to you. So come on up. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Well, howdy.
Howdy.
As was mentioned, my name is Megan Windham. I'm a registered and licensed dietitian, and I work in the Butyl Health Center on campus. So I see students every day, as you can imagine. It's crazy right now with any type of nutrition need. But what we want to dive in today is really just a little bit of the basics of nutrition. Some of these things are going to be things you already know. Some is just a refresher. For some of you, it may be completely new. So if you have any questions, this is meant to be very informal, so please just raise your hand at any point. Stop and ask me so we can make sure we address those. If there's a question that you have that you don't want to ask in front of the group, or if you're listening online, certainly you can email those or just ask me afterwards. I'm happy to address those. Okay? So we'll start out here a little bit. As we think about nutrition, I really would challenge you to think about nutrition as gas for your own fuel tank. And I tell this to students a lot. If you drove a BMW or a very expensive car, you probably wouldn't go fill it up with the cheapest gas possible. You'd put the premium gas in it. You'd give it a little bit extra. And I would challenge you to think about that for yourselves with nutrition. What you put in is going to give you the reward in the end, and we're going to look at each of those today. You may have seen this before when we think about what a plate should look like, but it's a really great image when we're thinking about just the basics of nutrition and what components we want to include. So when we think about this here, fruit is a component. Fruit is excellent to include. Some of the latest fads, diets, trends, we'll go through a little bit of that at the end, may discourage fruit or avoid fruit, but it is important, and we'll talk about that. Vegetables, a wide variety here is key, but really go with what you like. Don't feel like you have to eat beans if you hate beans. If you can incorporate some of these other types, that's excellent. Grains, we're going to talk about whole grain versus refined grains and what that means and what we're wanting to look for. Protein, certainly here, that's about another fourth of our plate when we look at this here. Oils, and then lastly, dairy. Dairy being a component that we encourage 3 times a day, whether that's yogurt, cheese, milk, or some other form of dairy. So when we look at our plate, my recommendation is always half our plate should be fruits and vegetables. And when we look at that, most Americans aren't including that. Most of our own plates, when we're busy on the go, fast food, restaurant, don't include that. So these are things I'm hopefully going to encourage you to do as we go through this today. Portion is another thing, and I get a lot of questions here. Okay, well, I'm eating fruits and vegetables, and my plate looks like that, but it's this tall, not this tall, or it's double the amount. So when I look at this, this is a great graphic, and I'll reiterate too, I think it was briefly mentioned to some members here in the audience, I will send these slides out to the wellness team so they can send these to you, so you don't have to frantically take pictures or snap anything. It's not copyrighted by any means. So when we're looking at portion control, this is just an example. I'm not going to read all of these to you, but you can see how we can space that out based on the size of our hand, based on our thumb, just some graphics and images. A lot of customers or patients that I work with feel like they have to weigh and measure everything, and we get sometimes obsessed about what we're eating or not eating, but we can use basic fists, hands, thumbs to really try to assess how much we're getting and what would be appropriate. So let's talk a little bit about myth versus fact here. So these are just some questions I get a lot of time from patients, from even I do a lot of grocery store tours with students, and so these are some of those classic, I'm in the store, what should I buy? So what do you think about this? Sweet potatoes are better than a russet or a white potato. What are your thoughts, or what are you seeing in the media on that?
Sweet potatoes have more nutrients.
Sweet potatoes have more nutrients. What else?
Less sugar for those that have diabetes.
Less sugar. We hear glycemic index, or less blood sugar effect. What else? Anyone a fan of white potatoes, russet potatoes? Okay, and why? They're good. They taste good. And a lot of what we do or what we choose is because it tastes good or because we like it. So let's look at this. This is actually a myth. We hear this over and over that sweet potatoes are better than white potatoes. Don't eat white potatoes. Don't eat anything white. But if we think about cauliflower and onions and garlic, those are all great for us as well. So let's break this down a little bit. When we look at sweet potatoes versus white potatoes here, very similar calories, very similar nutrients as far as potassium, vitamins, minerals. In fact, your white potato has more potassium than a banana. Most people wouldn't think that. They automatically think about potassium being bananas. In fact, we were doing I was doing a core health fair this last Friday, and everyone chose bananas because they had high potassium, but potatoes never got chosen. And so that's one under recognized nutrient that we don't think about with our white versus sweet potatoes. Now, certainly our sweet potatoes have some beta carotene, they have the vitamin A, but when we compare them serving size per serving size, they're very equal in nutrients. Some great toppings that we could add here too: fresh herbs, Greek yogurt, veggies, lean meats, beans. These are all great things that we could add to either that help with that. Yes, our white potatoes may be seen as a little bit higher glucose or carbohydrate, but in the end they both have carbohydrates. In the end they both have similar nutrients here. So don't feel like you can't ever eat a white potato again. Those are just fine for you. What about this one? Bananas are not good for you. What have you seen on this or heard about?
Lots of sugar.
Lots of sugar. What else? How many of you like bananas? They're economical, they're easy to pack, they're cheap. A lot of kids love them, so if you have a family, it's easy to buy in bulk and share. And really, we see bananas, I hear a lot of times, well, bananas have fat in them, or they're not good for my diet. And in fact, that is a myth as well. Bananas have many different things. They have that potassium, which we often hear of muscle cramping, blood pressure, that's a common one. An excellent source of vitamin B6, calcium, manganese, magnesium, iron, a whole list of nutrients here. They're portable, kid-friendly, great for recipes, so they're just fine for us. But it just takes one media or one social media post or an Instagram or a blogger saying bananas are not good, and then we start to buy into that. So know the facts here that bananas are just fine for us. They also have a source of fiber called pectin, which helps with blood sugar levels, similar to the sweet potato concept. Okay, one more here. Romaine has more nutrients than iceberg lettuce. True or false?
Yeah, true.
True. Why would that be true? Greener, a little bit darker. What else? Taste-wise, what would you prefer? Romaine, a little crunchier, has a little bit more to it. So you are correct. That is a fact. Usually the darker, deeper color have a little bit more nutrients. So when we compare these here, so our iceberg lettuce versus our romaine lettuce, very similar source of calories, so about 8 calories per cup. Good source of fiber and potassium, but where we get a little difference is good versus excellent. For an average consumer, that's like, yeah, those are both good. That's fine for us. But good means 10% or less of our daily value. Excellent is 20 or more. So in dietitian nutrition terms, excellent means something different than good. So it adds the higher nutrients here. but it still matters what we put on top of that. And so just because something is good for us doesn't mean we eat it in excess, similar to the bananas, potatoes, or any of our greens here. Okay? Questions on that so far? All right. Okay, so as we talked about greens, and we're going to dive into carbohydrates, proteins, fats, kind of go through the basics here. Fiber is one thing I get a lot of questions about here too. Well, how much should I consume? I'm eating Fiber 1 bars, isn't that good enough? So there's a lot of misconception behind what types of fibers we should consume. So we're looking at this. Fibers are carbohydrates that can break down into sugar molecules. They don't break down into sugar, but it's kind of this non-digestible piece that helps with the bulking agent in our digestive process. We have soluble and insoluble, kind of means exactly what it is. Soluble dissolves in water, insoluble does not. A lot of our insoluble fibers are what we're going to find in what I term some of those fake fibers. So Fiber 1 bars, things that have fiber in them that normally wouldn't, yogurts, that type of thing that you may see high fiber content. And as consumers, we buy those because we need more fiber or we feel like we do. And in fact, we may be getting just more of that insoluble, not the actual soluble fiber. And food sources of each of these, which you can see here. We also have our starchy versus non-starchy fibers. These are both things that we want to include in our diet, but you'll see a difference here in our starchy fibers, things that we often get enough of. Corn, potatoes, peas, this is a lot of the vegetables we may consume more often than some of our fibrous non-starchy vegetables. These are going to be great things we want to include in our diet because they both bring great benefit to that. So one is not better than the other, we just tend to consume more of these starchy fibers than our non-starchy. All right, so why do we need carbs? What's the benefit of carbs? Energy, yes. What else? How many of you like carbs? Most of you, yeah? It's a good one, right? So carbs are the body's and brain's main fuel source. So when we think about this, even the last presentation I did was talking about fad diets, and we talked about ketogenic diet and what that does and brain development and that type of thing. And we can go there if we need to at the end, but as we stick to this here, this is the main source of fuel for the brain. So when we don't have carbohydrates coming in, we usually don't think as clearly. This can lead to even some hormonal dysfunction, so lack of serotonin, lack of just those feel-good endorphins and hormones in our body. So we tend to have this kind of fatigue, tiredness, not have the energy that we need. It includes the memory, attentiveness, processing, decision-making skills. I'll even tell you I have some patients that I work with who struggle with disordered eating, and so when I find that they're really cutting carbohydrates or really limiting certain nutrients, I certainly can tell a decline in cognitive function. And it may not be something you pick up on right away, but when they come every week, you can certainly tell that there's just that disconnect. The forming of thought isn't quite there, and there's certainly concern there as well. So carbs are important. The body's immediate reaction here is if we increase our desire for calories to survive, we increase cravings for fat and sugar. Meaning, if we decide to cut out carbohydrates, our body's like, well, I gotta survive somehow, and we tend to crave them in other forms. For example, if you don't eat any carbs all day, healthy or unhealthy, say you're cutting out rice, you're cutting out pasta or bread, usually what I find in my patients, by the end of the day, they're eating cakes, cookie, candy, whatever they can get their hands on. They're craving it in other forms, which is also a carbohydrate, those sweets. So if we just add it throughout the day, we find that we don't have those intense sugar cravings or desires there. So we break down all the food that we have, but we try to avoid that, so we tend to overeat on it when we do get it though. So it's kind of that double-edged sword. And then our second response is then we tend to pull from muscles from energy. So if we don't eat any carbs, our body goes, well, my second best source is protein, let me pull that. And then we lose our muscle mass and tone. So that's just a downside of carbohydrates. And here again, we don't need to give up carbs completely because those are beneficial for our body. So what does 3 ounces of grain look like? This is another great analogy because I have a lot of international patients that I work with. And when we think about measurements, it really came to my mind when my patient said, well, the label says teaspoons, So my measurement should be teaspoons, but when you look at a food label, it says grams and ounces, and it's very confusing for most people. And you think about some of these patients coming over from different countries, it's really confusing, and it even is confusing for us. When they tell me to eat 3 ounces, what does that look like? I think of ounces as on a scale. I think of ounces as in a drink beverage. So this is a great example that 1 ounce is 1 cup of cereal, a slice of whole grain bread. And here again, I'm going to send all of these to you too, but this just gives a good reference point for what that looks like and what an appropriate amount should be. So with that, what do you think about protein? This is myth versus fact. You can't overload on protein. What are your thoughts on that? True or false?
False.
False. Why?
Too much of anything is not good.
Absolutely. I think that's the first point here. Excess amounts of protein offer no additional benefit. It's the same with carbs, it's the same with fat and protein. But we get in our minds that if I'm cutting out carbs, I've got to overdo protein, or I need to add more protein. And just like you said with carbs, that we need that for energy for our body, it's our brain's main fuel source, we also need that protein, and for certain reasons, but not to overdo it here again. So extra calories are extra calories, whether they come from carb, protein, fat. We need that balance, but anything in excess is converted to excess fat. It can cause damage to the liver. It can also cause damage to the kidneys because nitrogen is in protein. Protein is excreted through our kidneys, through that nitrogen, and it can cause that buildup and cause kidney damage. And I've firsthand seen that with a patient who was doing way more protein than they really needed to, 20 years old, and going into some acute kidney failure from that. So we want to be careful with that. It can also lead to dehydration too, so we want to be cautious. So here again is that protein serving, the size of our palm. Usually what I recommend for meat is about 3 ounces. That's a deck of carbs, width, height, length. That's what we're looking at for a serving. Certainly if you are doing more activity or exercise, and we're going to talk through that in the sports nutrition presentation, we may need more, and we may need more food just in general, but a serving of meat at a meal is about the size of our palm or a deck of cards. Questions on that? Okay. Yes.
Per day or per meal?
Per meal, yes, yes. Okay, so let's dive into protein here. So we talk about building muscle, but I want you to challenge yourself to think about as building balance on your plate. The plate that I showed you at the very beginning was carb, protein, fruits, vegetables, and dairy, not just protein or not just carbohydrate. So body breaks down protein into amino acids. Those are our building blocks of protein. It helps with body tissue repair, enzymes, hormones, transporting nutrients, and also muscle contraction. Protein is usually a no-brainer. Most people feel like, okay, I know I need that for my muscles. They don't need a lot of justification behind consuming it. But here again, we can overdo that or choose the wrong types if we're not careful. Okay, let's dive into fat a little bit. So low fat is better than full fat.
False.
False. Why?
Yes.
Usually have more sugar in there.
Okay, more sugar. What else?
You don't get the fullness feeling.
Satiation. Yes, absolutely. What else? How many of you prefer a lower fat diet or maybe need a lower fat diet? There's kind of that balance there for patients who have heart disease or trying to manage a lower fat diet. Maybe it's for gastrointestinal issues or gallbladder issues. That's something to keep in mind, so let's look at that. So you're right, that is a myth. Where I would suggest to choose lower fat, and we can go back and forth on this, is in our dairy section. Our dairy section usually has more saturated fat. That's things that can cause more artery blocking, a little bit of heart disease, but here again, there's a ton of research lately showing that full-fat dairy may help with satiation, may help with brain development. So I'm kind of on the fence on that one just yet, but outside of dairy, I would always encourage you to choose just the regular product, and we're going to look at why. So if we took our regular peanut butter versus our reduced fat peanut butter and go in the store and next time just compare these two, you'll see regular versus reduced fat. If we flip the labels over, which you see here, they both have the same amount of calories. They both have, one has less fat than the other, which it says reduced fat. We would expect that. But when we look at the type of fat, one has 2.5 saturated, this one has 3.5 saturated. What is the type of fat we don't want in our diet? Saturated. Unsaturated is more of the liquid at room temperature. It's the oils from our nuts and seeds. It's more plant-based. Our saturated, I always think it starts with the S. It's a solid at room temperature. So that fat around steak, the skin on chicken, most of all of our animal fats are solid. Coconut oil, if we think about that, it's solid at room temperature. You can't just pour it. That's more of a saturated fat. So saturated fats are ones that usually come from animals but can come from tropical plants as well. But all of our plants, our nuts, our seeds, our olive oils, those types of things are mainly unsaturated. So when I look at this, if there's 16 grams of total fat and 3.5 is saturated, the type that they took out is unsaturated fat, right? So yes, there's one different gram, but out of 12 to 16, that's a lot of unsaturated fat that they're changing. So they've taken my unsaturated fat, my good fat out, and replaced it with two things. What do you see on here that they replaced it with? Sodium and sugar. Two things that we get of plenty in our diet most often. So what we'll see a lot of times in salad dressings are the same thing. We'll see a lot more salt, we'll see a lot more sugar. It tastes similar, it has a similar mouthfeel, maybe not the best, but it has a similar mouthfeel, and we're going to see lower fat or less calories. Is it better? I would say no. I would say buy the full fat. You're going to feel fuller, you're going to feel more satiated, and it's going to help with absorbing different nutrients as well. Okay, questions about that content? Okay, let's go a little bit further into fats or oils here. So these top functions here are what fats do. They cushion organs, they help transport our fat-soluble vitamins. We have several of those in our diet, A, D, E, and K, that need fat to be absorbed. So if we think about, we have this great salad, we have romaine lettuce, we have all these different nutrients, carrots, and we put fat-free dressing on it, we're not going to absorb much of that vitamin A from the carrots. We're not going to absorb much of that vitamin K from the nuts. So having a source of healthy fat in our oil-based fats are great to do. It helps with long-duration type events. And here again, I mentioned we want to just really limit our hard fats. So that would be something like our olive oil, our hard fats we want to limit would be like our fat around steak, the skin on chicken, butters, things that are a little bit more solid, and try to encourage more of these plant-based fats or more of our liquid type fats. Okay? Questions on fats? All right. Okay, dairy kind of gets lumped into all of these. It has carbohydrates in it. It has some fat in it, depending on what type you get. And it's a great source of protein as well. So it's not necessarily in the fat, protein, or carb area, but it has each one of these. With our dairy provides fat, protein, calcium, vitamin D. When we try to include this 3 times a day, we're going to meet those nutrient recommendations of calcium and vitamin D components. With this, I would challenge you, if you're not a milk drinker, encourage you to have yogurt, encourage you to have cheese, encourage you to have those types of dairy if just drinking a glass of milk isn't your thing. The reason for this, it provides great amount of nutrients and an excellent source of many different things in one serving there. Questions on dairy, because this is kind of a hot topic lately in the media.
So for people that are like lactose intolerant, I know the big trend is like almond milk now,
Yes.
which is, I guess, mostly water anyway. So is something like lactate a better
Excellent
source of
question.
that then?
Yes. So the question was, if you're lactose intolerant or you're just not wanting to drink maybe cow's milk, what should we be choosing? And so when we look at the different types of milk, and milk has come a long way in many, just in the shelf in general, it used to be here and now it's here. So we have almond milk, cashew milk, rice milk, hemp milk. We have many different types. And the difference in our rice milk, almond milk, cashew milk, they have about 1 gram of protein per serving versus our cow's milk that has 8 or 9 grams per serving. So our protein content is different. They've made it very similar in calcium, vitamin D, those types of nutrients. But when we look at the ingredient list on those types of milks, it's pretty long. There's a lot of things you may not recognize. If we look at cow's milk, it's about 4 ingredients. It's milk, and then it's the vitamins and minerals that are fortified in there. Soy milk is very comparable to cow's milk in the protein content. So if you don't like cow's milk, if you don't want to drink it for personal preference or allergy or whatnot, I would encourage you to have the soy milk. If you're lactose intolerant, I would certainly recommend a lactose-free milk. So Mootopia, HEB brand of their lactose-free milk is excellent. Lactate, anything like that would be appropriate. So you're getting still all the nutrients, you're just breaking down the lactose already before you consume it. Yes, ma'am.
Doesn't matter whether it's whole milk or 2%, 1% skim.
Good question. So her question was, what's the difference in the whole milk, 2%, 1% skim? Which one should we choose? Here again, there's a lot of controversy on this right now. If you think about kids under 2, they drink whole milk for brain development, for some of the fat content. We have a little boy now who's about 16 months old, and so when I make things with whole milk now, because we have it in the house, gosh, things taste so much better. Like pancakes are much fluffier and better. And so I've noticed that difference just personally, but when we look at the flavor profile, it tastes different. We're seeing some benefits in satiation. We're seeing some benefits in brain development and cognitive function. But there's also the flip side of this of someone who's maybe struggling with their weight, someone who's struggling with needing a lower fat diet, that the 1%, 2% skim is really beneficial for them. So my personal preference is kind of go right in the middle. 1 or 2% is not a bad choice. If you're trying to manage your weight but still want some of the fat flavor and texture, if you're trying to gain weight, so some of my athletes or those patients who struggle with keeping weight on, your whole milk would be a great choice there as well. So I can see all spectrums of it. It depends on the personal patient or where you are, but they all provide great benefit. They're all going to have the same vitamins and minerals. They're all going to have the same protein. The only difference is the fat content. Yes?
This question may be not relevant, but what do you think about the organic milk and normal? I have noticed a lot of people these days buy organic milk.
What kind of milk?
Organic.
Organic. Okay. Yeah. So the question was organic versus just our traditional regular milk. And organic is really just the way the cow was raised or the way that food was grown. It's no nutritional difference. So from a nutrient standpoint, you're not going to find more protein in organic milk versus regular. Sometimes my patients will buy organic because it lasts longer. The reason for that, we would think that if it lasts longer, gosh, are they adding some preservative to it? Most of our organic milks, they pasteurize at a much higher temperature. So they call it ultra high pasteurization. That's similar to our milks that are on the shelf inside the store that aren't refrigerated. They're shelf stable. They'll last months like that. So when we ultra high pasteurize it, it lasts longer refrigerated as well. So sometimes my patients will buy that because they just don't want to go to the store every week. Otherwise, just the pasteurization process in regular milk is fine. It's just at a little bit lower temperature, so it doesn't last as long. Nutritionally, I say just buy the traditional cow's milk. You're not going to get any nutrition difference in that. People are concerned about hormone levels in our milk. So, will that organic milk have less hormones? When we look at them across the board, and I've done a lot of conferences with the Texas Beef Council and asking, and the National Dairy Association asking those same questions, when you look at the hormone level that's actually in the milk that you consume, it is so minute compared to just your own hormones in your body, compared to a birth control pill, compared to all of those things. So a lot of it's more media influence of don't drink that because it has hormones. A lot of these cows, if they are given a antibiotic or hormone, if they need that, they have a withdrawal period before they can milk them. They have a withdrawal period before they can slaughter them. So there's a very tight regulation on just the antibiotic, growth hormones, those types of things that they're using. They're more of just a vaccination. They're more of just preventative health, not necessarily to bulk up the supply of milk and that type of thing. Yes, ma'am.
Some of the media say that the ultra pasteurization break down the nutrition in the milk? Is that a myth or?
That's a good question. So she was asking that ultra high pasteurization process for milk, does it break down the nutrients? Not that I'm aware of. You know, that's how we got a lot of our shelf stable milks and a lot of these processes that we can ship out to areas. I think of even like the hurricane coming up, that we have things like that to use. So not that I'm aware of that it's going to break down anything. That heat process should not be doing that.
How about the micronutrition? Micronutrition.
Not that I'm aware of. That's a great question. I can look further into too, but there's nothing research-wise that I've seen that if we keep doing that, is it breaking things down? Okay, all good questions though. All right, so briefly on vitamins and minerals, this is another one people ask, well, what supplements should I take? Is there something in particular I should be consuming? Really keep in mind that your vitamins and supplements are not regulated by any type of certain FDA or like our food is with the labels on them. They have a governing board that looks at them, but it's not as stringent as how the food labels are created. They're not going to provide any extra energy. What I like to use here, let me go back. What I like to use here is just a general multivitamin is appropriate for most people. If you have calcium deficiencies, vitamin D deficiencies, if you have heart disease risk in your family, fish oil may be appropriate, but here it's very, very individualized. I really wouldn't recommend anything other than just a general multivitamin, if that, for most of the patients that I work with. If you're a vegetarian and aren't getting any B12 vitamins in or iron in, certainly that's a recommendation, but here again, not necessary in particular. I have a presentation planned for more of like nutrition through the life cycle, so we'll start through kids and middle adults, and then we get to elderly adults as well, so we'll talk through specific nutrients for those populations, but just as a blanket statement for the general population, I would say your general multivitamin is appropriate. Okay, water, we wouldn't be here without it. As you can see, about 70% of our body is water, so this is really important to be consuming as well. Whether that comes from tea or coffee or just general water or flavored waters, I would always encourage to stay hydrated. Your little giveaways are perfect for this, especially as we get into playing outside or getting overheated with the way things have been lately. We want to make sure we're getting enough of that. So great sources of not nutrients, but ways that help promote nutrient utilization. Same as we have fat-soluble vitamins, we also have water-soluble vitamins. So that means we need water, not just what's inside of us, but coming in to help regulate that and transport. 80% water, so we're basically just cucumbers with anxiety. Most of us walking around, as you can maybe relate to that as we're getting into the fall semester. I know I can. So I showed this at the very beginning, but this is really the basis of what we're looking at. When we look at the plate, we want half fruits and vegetables, a fourth grain, a fourth protein, and then we're looking at a serving of dairy 3 times a day. This is a great resource too, and so we'll keep going through the presentation here, but I just want to stop and say, if you're looking for credible resources, it's hard to find online, and I get a lot of students, just one yesterday that said, I'm just tired of searching online. I get misinformation. I get this one site that says this, and then this tells me this. I just need to know what I should be doing. And Choose My Plate is a great resource that's credible information. It's going to give you sound nutrition guidance, but it's also going to give you many different things if you're wanting to look at more on a budget. If you're looking at cultural cuisine, if you're looking at seasonal local foods, all great information and resources that are at your fingertips that you can trust in and be comforted in knowing that it's good information. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about added sugar. This is, these slides are going to be kind of eye-opening as you look at them too. I know when I was putting this together, it really opened my mind to why we eat what we do and some of the things that we do and don't even think about. Even as a dietitian, there's things that I know, but we get so caught up in doing it that we go, wow, I can't believe I had that. It tasted really good, but what was in it? So added sugars are one things we see over and over. It's not a killer. It's not, you can't ever have them, but this is just really to make you be more aware of where it is, where we're finding it, and how we can try to at least minimize it. Not cut it out completely, not never have it, but how we can just understand where it's at. So I'll send all these here again as well, but you can see these are a whole list of candy bars here. The apple here on the upper right has 17 grams of sugar, carbohydrate, and then something here on the bottom, our Mars candy bar has 35 grams of sugar in it. So you can see a difference in that. Our fruit is one of those things too. Yes, it has sugar in it, but it also has fiber in that outside that we talked about. It also has lots of nutrients in it, and we don't see the label as we're in the produce section. I think it's deceiving for some because, in fact, yesterday my patient said, I love pineapple, but I don't want to cut it up. Is there any other choice? I said, yeah, your canned pineapple is great. And he said, well, doesn't that have a lot of sugar? And I said, if you saw a label on a pineapple, you'd see the exact same as you would in your canned pineapple if it's in its own juice or in 100% juice. It's the same thing, but we often see that 17 grams of sugar and go, whoa, that's too much. But we don't ever have a problem with the 35 grams here. So just keeping that in perspective. This is another one. So if we look at Nutella, Nutella is a big one that a lot of my patients are eating or enjoy. And when we think about this, look how much the bottom section is sugar. A little bit hazelnut, a little coconut, then we get into our powder or skim milk, and then our oil. So the amount of nut in this is minimal. The amount of chocolate and sugar and oil is pretty significant. So know here again why you're getting what you're getting. Nutella being one of those things that has a lot more sugar in it than it leads on to being. Same with like our soda. So if we look at this, the difference is in if we had one soda per day for 7 days, that's 113.75 teaspoons of sugar. That's one soda per day every day of the week. If we look at the liter here, that's 455 teaspoons over 4 pounds of sugar in that liter. And so just being more aware of these things that aren't hidden sugars, we know they're there, but we don't physically see them. It's not like pouring it out of a measuring cup. This is another one that really is eye-opening to me too. If we think about the amount of sugar, these are little sugar cubes, and these are grams, so we have 39 grams of sugar in our soda, and vitamin water, 32.5. Our Arizona green tea, 48.9. This whole range of different beverages and the amount of sugar that's in them. And these are all added sugar. It's not naturally in there. It's not like your piece of fruit. It's not like milk that just has the lactose in it. These are all certainly added sugar. So something to really be aware of. So how do we know if it has added sugar? I'm hoping, and soon the label will be changed. You may see it on some products, but it says right now carbohydrate, sugar, and then eventually right under that on our food label it will say added sugar. So we're going to have a lot more information to see, is this naturally in there or is this just added? So that's going to be great, but it's not all there yet. It's a government process, and as you know, it takes some time. So where we can find added sugar are all in these terms here. Honey, agave, nectar, these are also added sugar. And so what I always recommend is to try to get your sugar from fruit or dairy. Those are going to be your better sources of natural sugar, and try to limit our added sugars. My recommendation for most patients is no more than about 20 to 25 grams per day. Okay, well if we had one soda, that blows it right there. So you can see how we can add up pretty quickly in our added sugar grams, but that's a great recommendation to think about. Okay, questions on sugar? Yes, ma'am.
Some ice creams have sugar alcohol.
Yes.
What is that?
Good question. So like Halo Top in particular, I lived or grew up in Brenham, so Bluebell is like my backyard, and you don't buy anything but Bluebell. But when Halo Top came out, I said, okay, I've got to try this. Every one of my patients is eating it. I could barely eat it because I'm used to a very fatty Bluebell ice cream. But what the difference is sugar alcohols are like an artificial sweetener. It's kind of like Splenda, Truvia, Stevia. It's not exactly that. It's a man-made form of sweetener that anything that ends in OL, so xylitol, sorbitol, maltitol, those are all sugar-free, and it's a sugar alcohol. Sugar alcohols digest differently than most of our artificial sweeteners, They react a little differently in our body. Sugar-free candies have a lot of sugar alcohols in them. Most of our really, really sweet products are going to have sugar alcohols in them if they have very little sugar listed on the label. They can cause a lot of gastrointestinal distress, so diarrhea, a little bit of bloating, a lot more side effects than I think they're really worth. Personally, I don't recommend them in large doses because of that. Long-term effects is kind of like our artificial sweeteners. Do we really know what it's going to do? They haven't been on the market that long. People used to only consume them if they were diabetic and maybe one small little sugar-free candy. Now we have people who are eating them like crazy because it's no sugar and it's low calorie. So I think we'll see some long-term effects of that, but right now we don't know what it could really cause. So I don't recommend it. I'm more of have the real thing. If you want ice cream, have the real thing, but eat 1/2 cup or a serving and not a whole pint at one time. Questions on sugar? Okay, good question. So if you wake up tired, we think about coffee, we think about energy drinks, and we think about sugar giving us that burst of energy. Here are some alternatives to try. So if you think about this, our fresh fruits, great source of sugar, great source of carbohydrate with oats. These are going to give us that energy and fiber that we need to keep us fuller throughout the day. Snacking on nuts, seeds, those have higher energy, a little bit of fat, good sources of vitamins and minerals, and also pretty economical and easy on the go. A glass of water to help our body stay hydrated and release that energy that we need can really be beneficial here again. Coffee is not bad. It's usually what we add to it that causes us to have higher calorie, causes us to have maybe more sugar and that type of thing. So coffee's not awful, but if you're depending on it multiple times a day, these are some great tips to help a little bit with that. I always try to focus on the nutrient-rich instead of the calorie-rich foods. So like greasy, fried foods, high-carb foods that are heavier, they sound great. It's going to leave us tired and a little bit more fatigued later in the day. All right, if you're struggling to find your focus on the big project, do it 5, you're exhausted, you're at the end of the week, it's Friday, and you're like, I just want to get out of here, I don't have time to think. These are some great things to think about here. Blueberries in our yogurt. Blueberries are great for satiation. They have the fiber content. They also give us a little bit of that brain boost. Leafy greens perfectly with our salmon. So salmon's a great source of omega-3 fatty acids. But if you hate salmon or don't want to eat it, your walnuts are great as well, and your flaxseed is excellent here too. So all great choices there. And nuts and dark chocolate. This is my favorite one because you can justify how dark chocolate can fit. But dark chocolate does have, the dark chocolate being 70% cacao or higher. You may see that little percentage on the label. So that's what I would suggest. With that dark chocolate, the reason it's beneficial is it has magnesium in it. Magnesium opens our blood vessels, so instead of staying really constricted, it opens them a little bit. It releases blood flow to our brain, to our muscles, to our body, to our heart, and that's where it helps a little bit more with that thinking power and brain power. So great for that, and combining nuts with it is a great source of protein that we can do. So great little justification for an afternoon snack. Avocado or guac to any meal. This really just helps with fat absorption, great source of nutrients. Avocados are kind of the hot new veggie or fruit, if you will, in the produce section. Great to add. Portion size is key here, though. Again, I think we mentioned anything of too much is not a good thing. So portion, if we think about just one of the large Hass avocados, 1/4 of that is a serving. The little small avocados, about 1/2 of that is a serving. So you can kind of think about what that would look like. Okay, feeling anxious or stressed. So I mentioned this already, but that complex carbohydrates, so whole grains, fruits, vegetables, things with fiber, helps with serotonin, which helps to calm a little bit. So think of whole grain cereals, breads, and pastas. Vitamin C can help return levels of stress hormones like cortisol. So if we think of vitamin C, that's inflammation, that's sickness. We usually take that to help. These are things, oranges and bell peppers are great sources of vitamin C. Our red bell peppers actually have about as much vitamin C as an orange does. So good information to know there. Vitamin B to help with nervous system. So vitamin B is great for Some of we'll look at this in the elderly population slides, but tingling in the hands, numbness of the feet, those are all signs that we may be low in vitamin B or vitamin B12. So you can see some sources here: eggs, meat, dairy, legumes, seafood, nuts, seeds, and even some citrus fruits will have that. So here again, it's that wide variety of nutrients. Trying to avoid the added sugar and sweets just because that gives us that surge, and then we drop in blood sugar, and that's when we kind of feel tired and even more fatigued. So if we do want something sweet, try to combine protein, the nuts with it, or try to choose something else instead or replace that with fruit. Coffee intake, as excess can inhibit serotonin as well as dehydration in small amounts. When I say small amounts, so no more than 4 cups per day, a cup being 8 ounces is the recommendation. Just from an overall caffeine standpoint and overall just dehydration and benefit of trying to consume more water instead of just the coffee. Bloated or having digestive troubles, here's some great tips here. Include increased fiber and fluid in different forms. So we want to make sure where our fiber is coming slowly if we're having those issues, and increasing fluid intake to help with that. Fiber-rich foods, as you can see here, we talked about that at the beginning, but a lot of times our brain and stomach are very interconnected. And I was watching something this week, and the physician was talking about why when we're stressed or anxious or nervous, we have stomach issues. And it's not uncommon because they're very interconnected. And so when we have that poor brain function or we have the poor stomach issues and we don't feel well and we're sluggish, it's usually interconnected here. So we got to get the digestive system on track. And the next presentation, we'll talk a little bit more about specific disease processes, and digestion will be on there too. I'm going to briefly go through these just because the last presentation that I did, we had a lot of questions about fad diets and what I should be choosing or not. At the end of the day, we want to look at that plate, but here are just some of the key takeaways from the last presentation. Juicing. So juicing is one thing that some of my patients or consumers will ask me about or that they're doing. Here again, I would rather have the whole fruit versus just the juice of the fruit. If you like to juice or you like the fact of that, try to blend. So put the whole fruit in, skin and all, and blend that, not just juice it. And that's a great way to get the fiber in as well. Detox. Here, my main message is your liver is a detoxification system on a daily basis. So any type of detox tea or supplement or pill is really just mainly a fancy laxative, and you're paying a lot of money just to be in the bathroom all the time. So I would not recommend that. And then gluten-free, when we look at a gluten-free diet, a lot of times these are missing in some of our fiber. It's missing in sometimes our iron and B12 because of that fortification system. So not something I would suggest unless you truly have a need to be gluten-free. All right, Whole30, this is another popular one as well. We do need whole grains, we do need our dairy here, and we do need our beans in our diet. And we reiterated that over and over last time. But the reason we need them is here again, that balanced plate and what's beneficial for our whole body. Paleo, here again, this is cutting out major food groups. So any type of diet or trend that cuts out a food group, I would really be skeptical and trying to figure out why it's doing that or what would be the true benefit in it. Because anytime we cut that out, as you can see, we need carbs, we need fat, and we need the protein variety. Intermittent fasting, so I just had a patient before I came over today doing this. And what this often leads to is just feeling hangry or hungry later in the day or in the morning. If you're like me, if it's like I haven't eaten in 4 hours, I got to find something or I'm going to just eat everything in sight. So this is another thing. When we wait too long in between meals, there's a lot of research showing that it causes us to overeat. Very similar to when we don't eat carbs or limit protein, we tend to crave them or want them in other ways. So our body knows what it's doing. We just need to try to listen to our body and not what's online all the time. Ketogenic diet here again. So this is one that's focusing mainly on protein and fat. So it cuts out most of our carbs completely. Here again, there was some benefit in this in brain seizure patients, epilepsy, that type of brain development. There's a lot of research behind that. But for the general population who doesn't suffer from seizures and doesn't have that condition, we really are finding that this isn't a long-term healthy diet to be a part of. So overall, make a lifestyle shift, one that's not a quick, easy fix. You want to combine all those nutrients on the plate that we're looking at. The 80-20 rule is what I like to share with patients, is eat well 80% of the time. Allow that other 20% to indulge in the ice cream, have chocolate, have a Coke, but trying not to make that 80% of your diet and 20% healthy. And when you can do that, you feel better, you perform better, whether it's mentally, physically, or emotionally, and you're also a better person for other people too. Exercise is also key. We're going to talk about that in the sports nutrition presentation. Intuitive eating is more mindful eating. We're going to talk about that in the very last presentation that I'll do, and talking a little bit more about why we eat what we eat, and there'll be a lot of fun things in that one as well. So here are some resources, as I mentioned again. Choose My Plate, health.gov, all very credible information. If you're just seeking more guidance or more than just the basics, I'm happy to help as well too. If you have any questions, I'm happy to address those. Now in front of the group, we have about 5 minutes or so. So if you have anything that you want to ask, it doesn't even have to be related to this presentation, but I'm happy to answer anything. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned magnesium when you were talking about a good source for blood flow, etc. Is it true that it helps also with sleep?
Yes, so the question was about magnesium, blood flow, that type of thing. What we're seeing a lot of the research there is magnesium and more headaches and migraines. So if you think about if we expand our blood flow and it's not so constricted, if the blood's not really having to push through, we have less headaches, we have less menstrual cramps, we have less body aches and cramps. So with that, I think that we're seeing a lot more benefit in magnesium just overall for our body. It's found in dark chocolate, it's found in many of our nuts and seeds as well. Sleep-wise, where you may be hearing is melatonin is beneficial for sleep. That's just an herbal supplement. A lot of my patients will take that. I don't specifically recommend it or prescribe it, but I have had good success with it. It's an over-the-counter like you would a supplement there. But I do believe if we can increase our blood flow to our body, not only do we have more movement and more activity, but it can help with things like sleep function and just our overall daily activity. Other questions?
How bad are diet sodas?
Good question. Here again, it's kind of like that artificial sweetener versus regular sugar. My perspective is I take patient per patient. If I have a patient who's overweight, diabetic, struggling to lose weight, and they're drinking 4 diet sodas a day, I'm probably not going to say much about that. I'd rather that than the regular soda to where we're struggling with more diabetes complications and weight management. Just for the general population, I always recommend, here again, have the real thing. So have the real soda, but maybe it's a small can per day instead of 4 large cans per day. The artificial sweetener concept is still really controversial right now. You hear many different things, and even from dietitians' perspective, I have several colleagues who will recommend it every single day and say there's nothing wrong with it, and there's a lot of research to prove it's fine to consume. And then there's a whole nother half of us that say, I'm just not really sure about that. I'm a little bit more skeptical about it again here as well, just because it's man-made, it's a little bit more artificial. If I were to choose any artificial sweetener, I would choose stevia or truvia. Truvia is made from a stevia plant, but that actually grows, and then they harvest the little leaf there. So it's not like Splenda that's made in a manufacturing facility. But here again, they all have their time and place. It's a personal preference. There's a lot more research coming out about just the satiation factor with artificially sweetened products. So even our light yogurts or our diet sodas or things that are termed light but still taste sweet, they are showing that when we have them, we tend to still feel hungry, so we eat more even though we consume less calories with that diet soda, because we never had that feeling of fullness. It's the same concept with our milk too. I think we're seeing that in our yogurts, in our dairy. If we had whole milk, we're consuming 150 calories. If we had skim, we're consuming maybe 90, but at the end of the day, we're making up for those calories in other food because we're more hungry. So I think you can go back and forth on all of that. Here again, it's a personal preference. There's no huge amount of research that shows artificial sweeteners are awful for us. There's not that, but there's kind of half and half to really say, yes, it's good, no, it's not. Yes?
So I feel like there is a lot of research coming out about there being a direct correlation between animal products, whether that be meat or dairy or something of that nature, causing cancer. So the question is, why is there so much about research coming out now? And is there any truth to it?
Yeah, and that's a great question too. With our research, we have to remember that not all research studies, but some are funded by the pork board or some are funded by Coca-Cola. And they have to have money for something, so I don't fault them for funding a research study. But we have to really sort through some of the research too. At the end of the day, cancer is everywhere. And so I think trying to pinpoint and say, well, I ate this, it caused cancer, it's kind of difficult to do, and in my mind is a little crazy. Because we all eat different things. We don't just eat beef every single day, 5 times a day. So part of it is who's doing the research. Part of it is there really truth to that? I certainly think if we look back to like chemicals in, say it's a processing plant or asbestos. Okay, yeah, we know the direct correlation of that. We know smoking causes lung cancer. We know that, but food is everywhere. We eat it in many different forms. People cook it differently. To me, there's not a whole lot of backing to show, yes, this is causal, or this food did this. I think we have to look at the whole picture. We have to look at the whole person with that. So those kind of studies to me are very, yeah, that's great information, but it's not a direct correlation. So I try not to take that so to heart, because what else was going on with that? Yeah, we can control for many different things, but at the end of the day, it's food. And it's very difficult to tell someone to eat 5 eggs a day and that's all you're going to eat. So with our animal proteins too, I think a lot of it's media driven. I think a lot of it's financially driven too, as far as what we're seeing in some of these research studies. And that's where we have to just take it with a grain of salt and go, is this really what I should be doing? It's same with like the carbon footprint of animals versus vegetarians and the benefits of that. If we look at, a good example here is like an organic farming process for cows. The amount of time it takes to grow that cow based on usage of the land, based on them not being able to give them anything else other than the grass, and then once they eat that, they've got to rotate to another pasture. It's not any more economical. It's not any more practical than the conventionally grown farmer who can feed him other things and save that land for the next herd that's coming through. So I think we've got to look at it more from that standpoint, not just one person saying or doing a research study on that. Does that answer your question? Okay. All right. Well, I'm happy to stay after and ask or answer any questions that you have too. Do you have anything else that they need to do or sign? Or?
And if you guys have or hear anything from any coworkers about getting registered for this, I want to apologize for any registration issues that we had through Train Track, but please do inform those who are interested in coming that they are more than welcome to attend. Really, the registration process just helps us on the front end, but if somebody just shows up, we are so happy to have them, so please encourage those in your offices to attend the next 5 sessions. We'll be here every Tuesday at 11:30 for the next 5 weeks, so yes.
Are you able to just register for one class at a time?
You can register for all of them now. I went in and created the registration process, so you should be able to register for every single session that you're available or wanting to attend now.
Okay.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming. Take care.
Thank you.